Canada thought it could play a clever game, but it ended up embarrassing itself on the world stage. The Canadian government, under Prime Minister Mark Carney, paraded around Stockholm and Helsinki, shaking hands and holding press conferences, thinking they could use Sweden and Finland as a way to pressure Donald Trump. They honestly believed that lining up Nordic allies would scare Washington into making concessions. But the exact opposite happened. It backfired instantly and exposed just how weak and desperate Canada looks right now. Remember, Canada was the first country to ratify Finland and Sweden's NATO membership. They wanted to strengthen Arctic alliances, but also believed it would open new diplomatic and economic doors. The problem is, when Ottawa tried to leverage that relationship against Trump's America, they gave away their hand without securing anything in return. They abandoned tariffs, surrendered bargaining chips, and walked away empty-handed. And let's be clear, Trump didn't blink for even a second. He won. The Financial Times itself confirmed that Canada got nothing. No tariff relief, no meaningful trade concessions, nothing. Ottawa's big pitch was simple. If Trump won't give us a fair deal, maybe Sweden and Finland will. So they floated military agreements. They whispered about critical mineral partnerships, and even dangled the idea of buying Swedish fighter jets instead of sticking with American ones. But Trump, he wasn't moved at all. This is the kind of bold talk that only looks strong on paper, but reeks of desperation in practice. It's like a teenager yelling at their parents that they're leaving home, only to come crawling back embarrassed because they can't survive on their own. Canada strutted around with Nordic leaders like it was staging a power move, but all it did was show the world it doesn't have real leverage. Trump knows it, Washington knows it, and even ordinary people online know it. Posts on X bluntly pointed out what was happening. Canada strengthening defense ties with Finland and Sweden, shopping for fighters and icebreakers, all in a thinly veiled attempt to move away from US dependence. But here's the reality. Trump does not lose a minute of sleep over it. What? Because America is still the largest consumer market in the world. No European partnership can replace that. Canada needs America far more than America needs Canada. That's why all the staged photo ops, all the handshakes with Nordic leaders, all the press conferences, it's just empty theater. They're pretending to gain leverage, but they don't have any. Trump set the terms from the very beginning. He controls the ballgame. And he's proven time and time again that when anyone steps out of line, he knows exactly how to punish them. With tariffs, with pressure, with sheer economic dominance. That's why Canada's so-called Nordic strategy is nothing more than smoke and mirrors. They bent the knee when the tariffs hit. And what did they get in return? Absolutely nothing. Trump didn't even have to lift a finger. He just let Ottawa sweat, fold, and humiliate itself. And now, here's the kicker. Canada thought it could gain independence by looking to Sweden for fighter jets. For years, everyone thought the Lockheed Martin F-35 was the done deal. That stealthy, fifth-generation powerhouse from the US was practically signed and sealed. But when Trump's America First trade policies rattled Ottawa, suddenly the decision wasn't just about military capability, it became about strategic autonomy. Canada wanted to show it wouldn't be tied down to one ally, even if that ally was its biggest partner. That's when Sweden's Saab Gripen, a plane once dismissed as second-rate compared to the F-35, was suddenly back in the spotlight. Sure, it's only a fourth-generation fighter and lacks the stealth edge of the F-35, but Sweden offered a big incentive. Assemble the planes in Canada, boost the domestic aerospace industry, create jobs, and give Ottawa more independence. The Gripen can even operate from rugged roads in remote Arctic regions. On paper, it sounds like a strong alternative, but the truth is, this isn't about the fighter jet at all. It's about Ottawa's desperation to show some kind of independence from the US. But let's be honest, no fighter jet deal with Sweden will change the fact that Canada's economy and security are tied to America. Trump has already proven that when he slaps tariffs, Ottawa folds. That's not independence, that's submission. Let's not kid ourselves here. When Trump put tariffs on Canada, Ottawa talked tough for maybe 5 minutes. Then what happened? They folded. They pulled back retaliatory taxes, they scrapped digital levies, they dropped their own defenses. Why? Because Trump made it crystal clear America holds the hammer. Canada can puff out its chest. But the moment Washington decides to squeeze, the Canadian economy bleeds. And that's exactly what happened. Think about it. Ottawa kept insisting it would stand up to Trump. Elbows up. Hockey toughness. That was the big line. But when the push came to shove, they blinked first. They didn't just blink, they collapsed. They gave away leverage. And for what? Empty photo ops with Sweden and Finland, hoping the world wouldn't notice that they had lost the fight before it even began. Trump has a simple strategy. He waits. He applies pressure and just watches as smaller countries panic and fold. He doesn't need to yell. He doesn't need to beg. He knows that America is the biggest door in the global economy. And if you want access, you play by his rules. And that's exactly why this Nordic strategy from Canada is such a joke. It looks bold in headlines, but achieves absolutely nothing in practice. Take the fighter jet fiasco as an example. The F-35, for all its cost and complexity, represents more than just a plane. It represents integration with the United States, advanced technology, and a security umbrella that Sweden simply cannot provide. The Gripen is versatile, rugged, and could bring jobs to Canada if assembled domestically. That all sounds great. But here's the catch. It doesn't shift the balance of power. It doesn't change the fact that Canada is still dependent on the US market, the US military network, and the US for its broader geopolitical security. That's why when Ottawa parades around claiming strategic autonomy, it rings hollow. They're trying to mask weakness with flashy deals and press statements. Trump knows it, Carney knows it, and voters in Canada are starting to wake up to it as well. You can't buy independence by shopping around for planes. You earn it through leverage. And Canada doesn't have any right now. And the optics are even worse. Carney promised Canadians he'd be tough, that he'd stare Trump down. Instead, what do we see? Concessions on tariffs, retreats on tax, and press junkets with Sweden that mean nothing back home. Critics are circling like sharks. Opposition parties smell blood. The Canadian press is ripping apart this Nordic strategy as empty theater. Voters are calling Carney weak, soft, incapable of defending Canadian interests. And honestly, they're right. Trump, on the other hand, is calm. He's smiling. He doesn't even need to make a public statement because his silence is louder than anything Ottawa can say. Every concession Canada makes without getting something back is a win for him. He doesn't have to move. He doesn't have to compromise. He just waits while Canada humiliates itself. That's the art of negotiation. Never give up something for nothing. And yet, that's exactly what Ottawa did. Look at the trade side of things. Canada gave up tariffs, and what did they get? No deal. No relief. Not even symbolic gestures from Washington. Sweden and Finland might enjoy the attention for a while, but everyone knows that without America's backing, those deals are meaningless. Trump is reminding the world that Washington is the center of both politics and economics. Every attempt to box him in only strengthens his position. The harsh truth is this: Canada thought linking arms with Sweden would look like defiance. Instead, it looked like surrender. They wanted to send a warning shot, but all they fired was a white flag. The entire strategy blew up in their face. Trump's position didn't weaken, it got stronger. That's the exact opposite of what Ottawa wanted. And it's not like Canadians don't notice. Voters see through this charade. They were promised elbows up toughness. What they got was handshakes and speeches that lead nowhere. They were promised a prime minister who would stand firm. Instead, they got a leader who bent the knee. That's political suicide in a country where people are already frustrated by high costs, weak leadership, and the feeling that Ottawa cares more about international optics than real results at home. Here's where it gets even worse. Every concession Carney makes is fueling outrage, not just from opposition politicians, but from ordinary Canadians. People are asking the obvious question: what do we actually get out of this? The answer is nothing. No economic relief. No trade breakthrough, just embarrassment. Canada looks like a country bending over backwards to please Washington while getting slapped around in return. Meanwhile, Trump is collecting victories without even trying. He doesn't have to give Canada anything because they already showed their hand. They blinked first. They gave up leverage before negotiations even started. And once you lose leverage, you don't get rewarded, you get ignored. This isn't just bad optics. It's a warning sign for Canada's future. If the government keeps playing this game, it won't just be tariffs on fighter jets. It'll be the entire Canadian economy on the line. Exposed and vulnerable to decisions made in Washington, not Ottawa. That's the price of weak strategy against a strong president who knows how to use power. So here we are. Canada thought it could bluff. Trump called the bluff. Canada lost, and the whole world saw it unfold. Back in Ottawa, the knives are out. Prime Minister Mark Carney built his entire image on the promise that he would stand firm against Trump, that he would not be intimidated. He told Canadians he would fight back with elbows up, like a hockey enforcer ready to defend the net. But what did they actually get? A leader who folded the second real pressure arrived, and voters don't forgive that kind of weakness. Trump didn't just win this standoff. He exposed how fragile Canada's position really is. Think about the sequence of events. First, Trump sets tariffs. Canada talks tough but retreats. Then Ottawa tries to shop around in Europe, hoping Sweden and Finland can fill the gap. That flops immediately, because no alliance in Europe replaces the US market. Then Canada doubles down with flashy press events, shaking hands with Nordic leaders, whispering about icebreakers and fighter jets. But Washington doesn't even acknowledge it. Silence. And that silence is devastating. It speaks louder than any official statement. It says, "We own you, and there's nothing you can do about it." The reality is brutal. Canada depends on the US for trade, security, and investment. No matter how many joint projects they announce with Sweden or Finland, it won't change that. Those partnerships might look shiny in the headlines, but behind the scenes, they don't add up to real power. They're optics, not outcomes. They're theater, not strategy. Trump understands this better than anyone. That's why he plays the long game. He doesn't rush to make deals. He waits for others to panic. He lets them sweat under pressure. And when they finally fold, he takes what he wants without ever giving up a thing. That's the art of negotiation. That's why, time and time again, his opponents walk away empty-handed while he walks away stronger. Carney, on the other hand, is left scrambling. His credibility is sinking fast. Critics are pouncing on every concession. Every failed attempt to stand up to Trump, opposition leaders are calling him weak, soft, incapable of defending Canada's interests. Even his own supporters are starting to question if he has the backbone to lead. That's not just bad for Carney. That's a disaster for Canada's image on the world stage. Because here's the hard truth. When you lose credibility abroad, you also lose leverage at home. Every time Carney retreats, he sends a message to Canadians that their government doesn't have the strength to defend them. Every handshake with Sweden that produces nothing makes Ottawa look more desperate. Every photo op that doesn't translate into real deals makes Canada look weaker, and voters can see it plain as day. Meanwhile, Trump is more than happy to let Ottawa keep digging its own hole. Every time Canada blinks, he proves his point that America sets the terms, not Canada. And that lesson is sinking in worldwide. Allies who once thought they could gang up on Trump are realizing that without leverage, they're the ones who get boxed out. And Canada, unfortunately, has become the perfect example of what happens when you pretend you can bluff without holding any real cards. So where does this leave us? Canada tried to send a warning shot to Washington. Instead, it waved the white flag. Ottawa thought aligning with Sweden would show strength. Instead, it showed surrender. They thought dropping tariffs and backing off retaliatory measures would soften Trump. Instead, it just made him stronger. And the result is humiliation on the international stage and outrage back home. And here's the kicker. Trump didn't even have to lift a pen. He didn't have to make a deal. He didn't even have to show up. He simply waited, and Ottawa caved. That's the difference between a strong negotiator and a weak one. Trump uses timing and pressure like weapons. Carney uses speeches and press releases like shields. But they're paper thin. At the end of the day, this so-called Nordic pivot isn't strategy. It's surrender dressed up as diplomacy. Fighter jets and icebreakers won't change Canada's reality. Sweden and Finland can offer symbolic support, but they cannot replace America. Ottawa may want to believe otherwise, but the markets know the truth. The world knows the truth, and Trump knows it most of all. That's why this entire episode is a cautionary tale. Leaders who try to posture against Trump without real leverage get beaten down. Carney promised toughness, but delivered nothing. He promised independence, but showcased dependence. He promised a fight, but gave up before it even started. And the message is clear. When you go up against Trump without the cards to back it up, you lose. So Canada is left embarrassed, exposed, and weaker than before. And Trump, he walks away stronger, smiling, in complete control. Because in this game of power, America sets the term, everyone else just reacts. And Ottawa just learned that the hard way